Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us here on a Saturday after what I'm sure has been a very busy, full time for everyone here. We're at the beginning of a new school year, and we're in a teacher strike right now. And we know that that is impacting everyone in this room, the families and colleagues that we work with on a daily basis. And we also stand in solidarity with the Seattle Public School teachers who are fighting for what children, families, and teachers deserve. So thank you for all you're doing to make that action possible, whether that's taking new children into your programs, whether that's staying home with your own children, or supporting others in their childcare needs. We see you and we appreciate you. My name is Becky Krieger. I am the outreach coordinator for the Hilltop Children's Center Institute. And we are very excited to be joined today by Cecille Kalafut, who is a speech language pathologist who serves a diverse population of children ages birth three and up and their families, and works at the Boyer Clinic here in Seattle on Duwamish territory. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you would like stars, hours, or a certificate of attendance for being here today, I'm going to go ahead and drop that once more in the chat. And you can fill that out at any time throughout our event today. If you aren't able to on your device or you just forget, you can just send me an email afterwards and let me know. We also really appreciate if you can have your cameras on. That just helps make this experience just a bit more dynamic and personal. We also understand that some folks are home with children right now, might be commuting, might have other responsibilities, and totally understandable if you have to keep your camera off. Let's see, any other things I want to share? Two more things I'd love to share with you all before we jump in to our content for the day. There's a couple of exciting events coming up, conferences coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that information in the chat. The National Progressive Educators Network is coming to Seattle, October 6th through the 7th. We do partner with that organization. I encourage you to check out their offerings. They have a pretty incredible lineup planned. And there is another conference coming up towards the end of October, and that's the WIAC conference, the Washington Association of Washington Association for the Education of Young Children. Their annual conference will be in person in Linwood this October, which is very exciting. They've had to go virtual the last couple of years. And we'll have a couple of Hilltop educators presenting there as well. So we hope we can check that out. And I believe that's all I have on my end. Without further ado, I'm going to hand things off to Cecille. And Cecille, thanks so much for being here today. And you're going to start us off with a land acknowledgement.
Yes. First, thank you all for being here, and just echoing what Becky said too, of take time for yourself this morning. If you need to take a bathroom break, get another cup of coffee, feel free to do so. We will have one short break just over halfway through, but definitely take what you need this morning. So before we get started, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge that we are on traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past, present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. So I'm gonna switch over to screen share now. And as we go through, well, first off, I'm gonna share a document for you all that we will be referencing throughout this, as well as it'll be helpful when we go out into breakout rooms to have this as a resource you can look it over with your group. Just put that in the chat. And again, if you guys have any questions throughout, I really want this to be a time for you guys. So if you have questions, definitely put them in the chat, or you can always raise your hand. But before I jump into the slides, I'd love for people to put in the chat your position and the age group that you predominantly work with. Awesome. We have lead preschool teacher, ages 3 to 5. Okay, another educator, 3 to 5, educator with the toddlers, another toddler room. Great, Vietnamese preschool, awesome. Three to 5, birth to 5th grade, great. Infant room, special education. Awesome, great. So we've got a lot of people coming from wonderful different backgrounds. So hopefully we can all collectively kind of get some different perspectives, and hopefully you guys get something out of this time together. All right, is everyone able to see my slides? Yes, awesome. I see a thumbs up. All right, great. Well, welcome to Thinking Thoughts and Feeling Feelings, an SLP's approach to supporting children's speech, language, and developing minds. Again, my name is Cecille Kalafut, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. So during today's 2 hours together, I'm hoping that you guys will come out with a little better understanding of what a speech language pathologist is, also known as an SLP. What is early supports for infants and toddlers? What to do when you have concerns around a student's development? What are skills that are important for early communicators? And lastly, how to foster linguistic and cultural understanding and acceptance within the classroom to help all children develop. So a little bit more about me. Again, I'm a American Speech Language Hearing Association certified speech language pathologist. I currently work as a lead therapist at Boyer Children's Clinic, where I predominantly work with kids that are birth to 3 years old. Prior to working at Boyer, I worked in the Federal Way school districts as an SLP, where I served kids from developmental preschool all the way through 5th grade. And in a past life, before I was an SLP, I worked as a special education paraprofessional in schools in Illinois. I also have a small private practice that I treat kids that are ages 3 to 18 years old. I'm a proud dyslexic, and I put this here because it really is the why behind the work that I do. I see the world with a dyslexic brain, and it's really guided me to this career path. And then outside of work, I love to go hiking, swimming, practicing yoga, and cooking. And you'll see here just a picture of my friend's little baby and some friends that visited not too long ago. So what is a speech language pathologist? A lot of times when I tell people what I do, they're like, what? Okay, what is that? So an SLP is really an expert in communication. We treat and diagnose people ranging from birth all the way through adulthood. People might come in with language difficulties, speech difficulties, fluency or voice differences. We work with kids that have social pragmatic difficulties as well as swallowing. An SLP is a healthcare professional that works in schools, home health, and I put here early intervention because that's kind of my expertise and what I'll be focusing on today, but as well as private clinics, universities, colleges, hospitals, and nursing homes. Okay, so you might be wondering to yourself, what are you doing working with kids that are birth to three as an SLP? And so I work through a program called Early Supports for Infants and Toddlers. You might have known this to be called early intervention. Maybe you've heard it called birth to three services, or maybe even Part C services. The current name that we're going with now is ESIT, or Early Supports for Infants and Toddlers. That was kind of changed about 1.5 years ago to kind of make the language more friendly and welcoming to families. So the goal really is to support families and really help with kids ranging from birth to 3 years old who have any developmental delays. We predominantly want to work in children's natural environment. So for some kids, that might be the home, daycare, maybe even a playground or library. And in conjunction with that, oftentimes I will try to use what's in the home. So kind of utilize bagless therapy, where I'm coming in and using the toys in the house, or making sure that we're working with daily routines the family's doing, and how can we make that the most developmentally enriching time. This is a federally funded and state program, so we make sure that it's accessible for all families, regardless of ability to pay. That does mean that sometimes families are being charged for services, but that never should be a barrier. So I know at my agency, we often will charge insurance companies for certain supports. However, if a family isn't able to pay the copay, for a lot of families, we kind of let that go, because we really want to make sure that people are utilizing these supports if their children need it. A little bit more about ESIT services. So this program was established in 1986, and it was really developed to enhance the development of infants and toddlers with disabilities, and looking for a way to reduce the educational costs down the line for kiddos, because we really know that the earlier we intervene, the less intervention it's going to take when kids get in those school age. Again, we're wanting to maximize independent living and enhance the capacity for families to meet their children's needs. So again, really an emphasis on supporting the family. Supports might include speech language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing services, feeding therapy, or special education services. We also on here, we have vision services, and in Seattle, we also have, we help kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. And again, building on those family strengths and providing them with tools they need to help their child be successful. Okay, so I do have for you all that will be sent out after this presentation, a resource sheet with a lot of the resources that I'll be talking about throughout the presentation today. But here is how do you refer to ESIT? So the first step is really talking to parents about their children's strengths and as well as the challenges that they might be having. One thing I really want you to take away is that it's always better to provide support sooner rather than later with these kiddos. So again, this will be sent out with this hotline as well as the website. One thing I do want you to, we will be utilizing the growth and development chart. So that is on the handout that we shared at the beginning, the Google Doc Drive. So if you guys want to just take a second and open that up in a separate web page, and we'll be referring back to it in a few slides. And again, this second link is for getting that tool in multiple languages. So DCYF has a few other documents on their website that are translated. So that's a great resource for our families that are not English speaking. So for my friends out there that are working with our 3 to 5 year olds, if you have concerns about their development and think that special education supports might be helpful, you can always call Child Find. So for here is the information for Child Find in Seattle. However, there are, depending on where the child lives or where their private school is located, they might be outside in a different school district. However, Child Find, again, is a federal program, so it should be in all school districts that the child is in. One thing to keep in mind too is that even if our kids are not attending public schools, they still might be eligible for special education services. So our kids that are houselessness, homeschooled, attending private schools, wards of the state, or those highly mobile families that are moving around a lot, they still might be eligible to receive special education services. One thing to keep in mind too is sometimes we have kids that are showing delays in our classroom, but maybe aren't showing delays enough where they're going to qualify for some of these federal programs, such as ESIT or services through the public school systems. So I wanted to just put a plug out there too, that there are also private practice services as well as clinic-based therapies, that if a family is kind of like, hey, we still want support, but they didn't qualify, that's another avenue that you can guide them towards. Okay, so timeline and steps for students to receive special education services. So the first step is to really talk to parents and caregivers about the child's strengths. So we always want to highlight all the wonderful and great things they're doing in their classroom, as well as bring up maybe some challenges that they're having or some areas of concern. Using this growth and development tool might help steer and guide that conversation for you. The next step is provide, and I did put on here that families, childcare providers, teachers, pediatricians, or anyone who knows that child technically can refer them for an evaluation. That being said, for our kids that are birth to 3, and the therapy services are really focused on working with the families, it's important that we have that family buy-in. So typically at that age, the referral is coming directly from the family or it's coming from the pediatrician. So really guiding the family and educating them about the resources that are out there, and then giving them the information so that they can take that next step. For some of our kids that are a little bit older and more that school age where they might be getting the services within the classroom that they're in, talk to your supervisor about what your program's policy is for making that referral. According to the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, it does say on there that anyone who knows the child well should make a written referral, but that's something, again, to talk to your supervisor about kind of what your policy is for making those referrals if you're running into families that maybe aren't completely ready to kind of make that next step on their own. So after a child or a family has made that connection with an ESIT agency or the school district, they will be contacted to schedule an initial evaluation. For ESIT, regardless of a kid coming in with one area of concern, we look at all areas of development just to kind of see if there's any areas that are missed that they might also need additional supports in. If a child does qualify for services, then a meeting would be scheduled to go over goals and frequency with the team. That big kind of legal document is for our kids that are birth to 3 is called an IFSP, which stands for Individualized Family Service Plan. And for kids that are 3 or above, it's called an Individualized Education Plan, an IEP. I just wanted to leave you guys with this little tidbit that about 1 in 6 children in the US between the ages of 3 to 17 years old have 1 or more developmental delays. So just kind of keeping in mind that, there's going to be kids that are coming through your classroom that probably would benefit from some additional supports. How's everyone feeling so far? Any questions that have come? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the chat. Let me take a look. Okay. Oh, great. It's just people kind of telling us no. Great. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna go into our next activity. It's gonna be a breakout room. So again, if you haven't already opened up that document, okay, I'm playing with two screens today, so my cursor gets lost in the ether sometimes. But we're back. So before we jump into breakout rooms, open up that growth and development chart and have that ready, as it might be something that's helpful in guiding this conversation. So what I want you guys to get out of this breakout room is kind of practicing using this birth to 6 growth and development chart to help guide conversations with parents that you might have concerns about their child's development in your classroom. Okay, so we'll have 2 cases, and I'll have you go into the breakout room after we go over the first one for about 10 minutes. We'll come back briefly. I'll show you case number 2, 10 minutes in the breakout room, and then we'll come back and kind of have a discussion about it before going into a little break. Okay, so our first little friend is Charlie. Charlie is a 12-month-old child who lives in the Ballard neighborhood with 2 parents. Charlie lives with one older sibling who is 5 years old. Charlie's family speaks English at home. Charlie seems to enjoy playing with other children and appears happy when her parents pick her up from Hilltop Learning Center at the end of the day. Charlie is independent with eating finger foods and is starting to use a spoon during snack time. Charlie is quiet when she plays and does not imitate actions or sounds during music time. Charlie loves looking at books with her teacher and will often point to items when named. Charlie will sometimes wave hi when prompted by her teacher. Charlie is not yet using recognizable words and lets people know what she wants by vocalizing and pointing with her index finger in the direction of items she wants. Charlie is a mobile child who can walk and get up from sitting to standing independently. Okay. So with your groups, I'd like you to take some time and really think about, do you have any concerns about Charlie's development? If so, what are they? What questions might you want to ask Charlie's family about her skills? How would you talk to Charlie's parents about your concerns? Are there any additional barriers that might be impacting Charlie's learning? And are there any barriers that may be impacting Charlie's family's ability to access services? So before I have Becky put you all in breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions? All right. Stop my screen share. All right, so we'll have you go in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes.
Okay, everybody, we're going to send you off here. You said 3 to 4 per room, Cecile?
Yeah.
Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms. Let's see. Dippa, Jen, and Yolanda, did you get an invite to join a breakout room? Dippa, do you see an option there to join your breakout room? Caitlin.
Well, thank you, Caitlin, for kind of jumping off the whole group discussion. I loved hearing all your thoughts about this little one. So we'll start with kind of talking through Charlie. I'd love to hear what other groups thought. So first thing is kind of thinking about, what did you guys think about? Do you have any concerns around Charlie's development? And if so, what are your concerns?
If folks would prefer to type in the chat, if you don't feel super comfortable speaking up, that's totally okay too.
Great. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, Faraday.
Faraday. Oh, what a beautiful name. Faraday shared, I would have concerns about hearing. Yes. What exactly was giving you concerns around hearing?
Because he doesn't imitate when he hears music. And I think by 12-month children should be saying some words, and just easy ones.
Yeah, great. So really kind of hone in on that expressive language, and there's some delays there, and could it be caused by hearing? Awesome. Anyone else? Oh, I see a hand raised. Feel free to come off chat and again, say your name for me. Oh, you're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I am Django. I would disagree a little bit with Faraday, although I always think it's important to have hearing check just to rule it out, because it did in the description say that Charlie would point to objects when named. So say that, well, you know, at least when you're close enough, Charlie could hear something that resembles enough of what they remember it to be. We did talk about in our group whether or not it was clear that Charlie was saying or just using the one word communication approach simply at school. Because you will hear sometimes, you know, parents say, well, they don't do that at home, or they do this at home. So it's something that you want to try to either make a connection or see if there's some contrast. And then Tess pointed out in our group that you want to make sure to put together, if there is going to be a referral moving forward, that you make sure that it's very strength-based and that there's a good amount of evidence of Charlie's strengths, just like in the description that you gave earlier, how happy Charlie is to pick up and how they're fully participating, or as fully participating as they can. We went through the developmental chart too, and it looked like there was enough of delay, at least in the speech, as opposed to some of their motor development seeming to be where it needs to be, and the focus mainly being on communication. And that we want to make sure that the parents don't feel stigmatized, or that you know, you're coming after them like, we got to fix this kid. You know, where this is a very straightforward thing. You know, the data shows that it's a very common for kids to need some services and to have access to those services moving into the referral meeting, being very prepared with that information and those resources and the links to those resources. I think the one thing, I think I can kind of speak for our group here, is that after that is all said and done, is that there could be still a lengthy wait for this child to get the services. But at least in this case, with Charlie being, you know, just barely a year old, that hopefully they wouldn't have to wait so long that Charlie would continue to experience that delay. So.
Great. Thank you. Jingo, you brought up some really great points and kind of led us into the next questions of kind of what might you ask families and really saying, okay, you know, how are they communicating at home? What does this look like at home? Because often there is that kind of discrepancy of sometimes kids might feel more comfortable showing certain skills in one environment than the other environment. I also really like that you brought up that it can take a while to get services. My group, a question came up of, you know, it seems like Charlie's doing a lot of good things. You know, it just seems like they're kind of late with saying words. Does that warrant a referral for ESIT services? My answer is yes, 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 yes. If there's any delay at any point, you should be making that referral pretty quickly. You know, again, there's variation in, is the family ready to take that next step? And that is something that's a little bit out of your hands, but you should be providing families with these resources and encouraging them to take those next steps, because there can often be a wait to get services, as well as, you know, a 1 month delay at 12 months. Then we get to 16 months, and now we have a, you know, 5 to 6 month delay. And so really like wanting to get those supports as soon as possible. Okay. Does anyone have anything else to share about our little one, Charlie? Okay. Yeah, sibling could affect. Caitlin, do you mind elaborating either in the chat or coming off mute a little bit more of what could be impacting by the family?
Sure. So in my experience, children with siblings often end up speaking early because they have someone in the home modeling. Well, they have an extra person in the home modeling speech with them, talking with them, communicating with them, or there can be a delay because the older sibling tends to speak for them. So it's a younger child doesn't really see the need to start speaking. And then, you know, that turns from well, I just don't have to do this yet into a genuine delay.
Yeah, great point, Caitlin. That family dynamics really comes into play a lot with, you know, kiddos and their communication abilities. That being said, you know, it's always good, again, to make that referral because sometimes there can be underlying things and it's often difficult to really parse out without kind of being in the home and seeing what's going on, you know, what the factors are. So even if you're like, hey, I knew I had that older sibling in my classroom and they're a chatty little one, you know, still making that referral for ESIT, even if you're having these suspicions of what might be the underlying cause. Great, thank you so much for sharing. Right, so we'll jump into our next case study. Again, I'll move into screen share and then we'll pop into our groups for about 10 minutes, come back and discuss, and then we'll have a little break. Okay. All right, so our next little friend is Ahmed. Ahmed is a 20-month-old child who lives with his parents, 2 older siblings, ages 6 and 10 years old, and a younger sibling, age 6 months. Ahmed's family moved from Ethiopia to Rainier Beach neighborhood 7 years ago. Ahmed's parents primarily speak Somali and some English at home. Ahmed really loves cars, trucks, running and climbing on the playground. During free time play, he loves to dump out all his trucks, put them back in the container, and then sometimes he'll put them in a line. He also loves throwing balls. Ahmed is able to say numbers 1 through 5 and a few color words in English, but he is not yet saying any other recognizable English words on a regular basis. Ahmed can independently eat with his fingers, but still needs help with a spoon. Ahmed does not yet wave or point to communicate. Ahmed will frequently come up to his teachers and talk in long strings of sounds with adult-like intonation, However, most of the time they don't understand what he says. So before I put you back in your breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions? All right, we'll see you all in about 10 minutes. I missed my mark to go. Thank you, Becky. I saw it pop up and then I was like, oh, chat. I was like, oh no, everything's on my screen.
Just
Does anyone want to share what their group chatted about? I know the group I was in had a very robust conversation, so I was glad to be a part of it.
I'm happy to share for our group, but I'll pause and make sure that there's no other group that wants to participate first. Oh, come on, groups. You had lots to say. Don't be shy. Okay, fine. I'll go. Sheesh. We got into our second group session, and because we hadn't read the second scenario, lots of questions came up to us about assumptions. And our first question was, are we supposed to be assuming something in regards to these two scenarios based on race or social economic status? Because it seemed like when we were talking about Charlie, there was no identifier about race in the descriptor. But then when it got to Ahmed, it identified his native language and his race. And then also that there was a distinction between one living in Ballard and one living in Rainier Beach, I think. And so our whole conversation went to discussions about assumptions around resources, whether or not we are evaluating Ahmed based on the English language and not taking into consideration that he may be developing at a atypical rate for it in his home language. You know, are we evaluating him in Somali, or are we making assumptions based on what we perceive as being appropriate in English? We also talked about cultural aspects of him being Ethiopian, and maybe he doesn't eat with the utensil, but we're making an assumption that he should be grasping a spoon. So should we be evaluating something else, like being able to grasp a crayon versus utilizing a utensil when he's very independent and eating with his hands? So we just went on and on and on on lots of topics, and that we have a responsibility as educators to learn the Somali language to communicate, and that he's probably processing his words to translate what's in his mind from Somali to English, and that might be what we're perceiving as babbling, but really it's him trying to communicate so that he tries to speak fluently, but it's jumbled words that we're saying that we don't understand. So it's his responsibility as a 20-month-old to make us feel comfortable when we should be making him feel comfortable.
Yeah, thanks, Darlene, for sharing. You really hit it on the nose of kind of that was the what I was hoping to take away from this. I saw, Django, that you gave a thumbs up. Anything else you want to add that your group talked about?
Well, I don't know that I'm the official representative of my group. I just liked what Darlene was saying, and it did connect with what we were talking about culturally. And I think it's really important, not just the speech, but also the eating with hands and the either the pointing or the waving. This is not a universal acceptable way to communicate or even comment. You know, in many cultures, you know, pointing is rude. You know, there's different ways to identify things, either physically or non-verbally. So that's something to consider too. And I just think that trying to, expedite this child's cultural integration through using utensils when, they're working hard to communicate through two languages is, I don't know, just not the priority, I guess, is why I kind of gave my thumbs up, because I think Darlene was echoing much of what we were talking about in our group.
Yeah, great thoughts. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so we have all these kind of wonderings about, his cultural background, what's important at family and at home. Has anyone been in the experience of having conversations with families about this? Or how might you kind of open up these conversations? Especially if it's a family with maybe a culture or a language background that's different than your own. Well, I know in my own experience of having a lot of, these conversations is really asking families and coming on with a perspective of curiosity and really trusting what's important to them. The first being that making sure that we always have language access for families. So utilizing interpreters all the time when you're having conversations with that family, as well as the this growth and development chart. Again, there are translations on the Department for Children, Youth, and Family Services website, as well as a lot of different resources translated about ESIT as well. I see Becky put in the asking questions to know more about their culture. What are meal times like? What's important for you and for your child to learn? What goals and values do you have for your child? Yes, exactly. Yeah, kind of really coming in with those open-ended questions and coming in with a curiosity and a trusting and a loving mentality when we're opening up these conversations. And also understanding, for kiddos that you end up having these conversations and you're like, I still think they're delayed. And families come in with their own, life of experience and might have their own thoughts towards getting interventions or thoughts towards, having, the system, again, kind of being a part of their life and their child's development, and also being respectful of that at the end of the day, we can offer these services to families and let them know it's available, but at the end, it's in their hands. So really also taking that off your role. Your role is to provide these resources and let families know that it's out there. But at the end of the day, it's their right as parents to kind of have that decision on what route they want to go down. I often find too that sometimes it takes multiple conversations, and kind of bringing up these open-ended questions of, when he comes up and babbles to you, are you understanding what he's saying? And if that's kind of a no, or yeah, we've been working on spoon feeding at home, and kind of having these conversations and being like, okay, let's check in a little while. Sometimes it does take multiple times of kind of bringing up these things before parents are kind of ready to take that next step. And sometimes it takes, years and they're beyond your time, but still they're often think back on those early conversations you had as well. Great. Well, thank you all so much for bearing with us this morning and for sharing your thoughts and ideas. We will take about a 10-minute break. But before we go, does anyone have any questions or final thoughts?
Cecile Tess posted a great comment here in the chat.
Let me pull up my chat. Yes. We talked about having a coach or director, co-teacher with us at the conference, talking about strength-based approach, introducing them to other parents who have children with similar needs. Awesome, Tess. Those are all great ideas. I would also emphasize when we're thinking about introducing parents to other kids with similar needs, seeing too if there's any resources that are, or family groups that are within their own culture background or their own language background, and really connecting families who have similar paths. Awesome. Well, we'll see you all at about, time is it 11? Yeah, we'll come back at 11:53. I'll see y'all soon. Great. If you wouldn't mind just if you are here, pop your camera on just for a second so I can get a feel of who's back in their chair. Hello. I don't know about you all, but I just did a dance break in my office. Welcome back. Great. Any thoughts or questions come up over the break?
I had a question, Cecile, about the birth to 6 document that you supplied for us here from the Washington State Department. I haven't looked closely at the entire document, but I was just wondering, I mean, do you know if when they were putting together this document, they were using by multilingual, multicultural elements to inform the milestones that they created here, or what's typical?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure what the background as far as the making of this document.
Mhm.
My assumption would be that there was some of that taken into consideration. However, I don't know offhand, but that's a great question. I do know that it is translated in quite a few other languages, but that's something I'm going to take a look into and see if I can get an answer. That's a great question.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was something I was reflecting on too, because it came up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I've worked with so many kiddos over many years, and it just seems to always kind of be like an afterthought, or you have to scroll through some stuff, or there's some sort of little fine print somewhere. It's not something that I feel like a lot of educators just look at up front, right? They just sort of skip over the whole bilingual thing and focus so much on the learning English thing, and they're not learning English, like the monolingual learners. And then later on, when it becomes like, oh, well, did you think about their home language? And they're like, well, what about it?
Mhm.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
I had this debate with people about bilingual learning, and so many people just don't get it. And I just kind of feel like, at least on the surface there's just not enough, I think, in the assessment that says, consider this, this is important. The brain development, the language development piece of it in a multilingual, multicultural context is just not, like I said, it just still feels like an afterthought. Even if the people making this document considered it, they're not documenting it for us to consider. So it takes a lot of trainings like these and a lot of mentoring from people who've been around. And I feel like there's a lot of reliance on that, as opposed to showing it in the science and in the assessment.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, thank you both for bringing up these really great points. And that's also too where, there is some, again, this is just meant to be a screener, but there is some of kind of using our own knowledge of cultural differences and language differences to be like, okay, is using the spoon really the skill, or is it being able to grasp? Darlene brought this up in our group too, of maybe he's able to pick up a crayon and color with it, and kind of doing our own kind of parsing out. And always the default, especially at these young ages, is defaulting of what the family's values are. So really opening up this dialogue of, is this skill important within your family? Is this something, what are you seeing at home? What is this kiddo able to do at home? And really kind of letting the parents be the expertise on that. And then using that to kind of guide your just curiosity and better understanding. Yeah. And we will, in this next section, go through some, differences in bilingual language learning, as well as some myths and things that I've heard come up in just my working with families from different language backgrounds. So any other thoughts that people want to share? Okay, so hopefully after our first hour together, you have a better understanding of what a speech language pathologist is. You understand more about what early supports for infants and toddlers are, and you understand kind of the next steps if and when you have concerns around a child's development. During this next 40 minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about what skills are important for early communicators and how to foster linguistic and cultural understanding and acceptance within the classroom to help our children's language develop. So this next slide, I intentionally left blank, kind of thinking about what is communication. So I want you guys to kind of take a few seconds for the sake of time. If people want to shout out right away, if not, I'll kind of let you know what my understanding and definition of communication is. But anyone have any thoughts they want to share? Right. Just for the sake of time, I'll jump into it. So communication is really the sending and receiving of information. So it's really those two parts of both sending information and then receiving information. I'm just pulling up the chat here. And communication is kind of an umbrella term. It's talking about language, so receptive language, our understanding of language, as well as expressive language of how we communicate to others. Now, expressive language can look like people using their voice. It can look like people touching a symbol on a screen. It can look like someone handing you a picture card, or it could look like using signs or gestures. And then also it encompasses this idea of social pragmatic language. So kind of the unwritten rules around language of how we communicate and interact with each other, whether that's through using our eye gaze or gestures or body language, also all comes into play when we're thinking about communication. So really taking away that idea that communication is more than simply using words. I know that that's often, a big thing that families are, coming to me and they're like, I just want them to say more words. And oftentimes there's all these other pre-language skills that need to happen before we start seeing those first outputs of words. So the first thing that we're looking for is response to the environment. So this might look like responding to loud noises, maybe sudden movements in their environment. Typically, we start seeing this around 3 months. Then we want to see kids that are responding to people. So they're showing interest in interacting with people more so than just the object in the environment. Next is, and that's usually around 6 months, we start to see kind of that more interaction and response to people. Then we have joint attention. So joint attention is showing interest or sharing interest in what someone else is interested in. So often this can be seen in those early before language as using your eyes. So you might see a kid look at you, look at the item they want, look back at you, and really kind of showing like, hey, do you see what I see over there? Then we have turn taking. Now, turn taking can look different depending on the kid's age level. So it's really getting at this idea of kind of reciprocity, this back and forth. So it might look like you making a raspberry noise at your baby and them giggling back at you. Or it might look like trading an object back and forth to each other. Then we want to see kids that are playing with toys in a variety of ways. So play lets us have a little insight into kids' development and how they're interacting and understanding the world around them. It also shows us, if they understand object permanence, if they're understanding how to use certain objects in a certain way. And then also there's a huge correlation with language development and play skills. So oftentimes we won't see kids start to combine two words until they're starting to play with two unrelated toys. So really showing that cognitive idea of, I know how to put two unrelated things together. So often there's a lot happening within play that's also going to correlate to a kid's language. And then we want them to develop a longer attention span. This attention span is important because it gets at the idea of stay and play. If we don't have a kid that's kind of sitting with us for at least some amount of time where we can model and show them different skills, they're not going to be able to absorb it and do it themselves. So typically when we think of attention span, a good kind of rule of thumb is you multiply the age by 2, and that's how many minutes a kid should be able to kind of interact with one activity. So if we have a 2-year-old, we would expect them to be around 4 minutes with kind of interacting with one activity. And then for a 4-year-old, it would be 8, and so on and so on. Okay. Next, we want kids to understand words and follow directions. So we must have language here before we're going to start seeing it here, or we're going to start seeing an output in whatever way that child is communicating with us. Next, we have vocalizing purposefully. So this is just getting at the idea that, you know, a lot of early babies will have cooing, gargling, laughing, but we want to see kids that are really making those intentional sounds. So that might look like a kiddo making a beep beep when they see the bus, or vroom with their car, or maybe kiddos are making those animal sounds. And even at this time too, of a kiddo, you know, making that and pointing, like that is really intentional, even though it's not a word yet, but really kind of looking for that purposeful, like, I know I have this tool and I want to use it to tell you something. Okay, the next skill is imitation. So imitation often kind of works in a hierarchy of skills, from bigger movements to the smaller movements. So we'll often see kids imitating, you know, putting their hands up first, or clapping their hands. And then next we might see them imitating stirring something in a bowl, you know, or making the more sign. And then we start seeing kids kind of doing some imitation here, sticking out their tongue, making silly noises, before we get to imitation of words. So kind of really thinking about, okay, how is this kid imitating? Are they imitating at all? And kind of really thinking about it more so than just like that pure imitation of words. Using gestures to communicate. So there's a huge correlation between the amount of gestures kids are using from 9 to 16 months. Is a huge indicator of if there'll be a delayed talker or not. So really those early communicative gestures of pointing, clapping, reaching, waving, using their eyes to let you know they want something is really, really vital. On the resource sheet, you guys will see I shared the first word project. And this resource sheet I'll share, this is the one that's coming later, but that is a great resource, and they have this idea of 16 by 16. So really looking for 16 gestures by the time a kiddo is 16 months old. And the last is initiation. So a child demonstrating an understanding of that cause and effect, and having this, what I like to refer to as communicative intent. So this is often an indicator of if a kiddo is just kind of a late talker, or if there might be another developmental difference going on there, especially kiddos that end up with to be autistic will often have kind of some differences here in just how they initiate communication. Okay, so you might be wondering, how does this affect our kiddos that are learning multiple languages? So I often get this question with kids coming through, and there's quite a few kind of myths that I've heard people say around multiple language learning. The first myth is learning multiple languages causes kids to be confused. And that really isn't true. So kids will sometimes see where they'll do what's called code mixing. So this refers to when they're putting different words from different languages in the same sentence. And oftentimes they're doing this because that might be the language model they're seeing at home. Oftentimes bilingual language speakers will kind of just fluidly add different words from different languages within their everyday talk. And it might also be, and this is typical for monolanguage learners too, so kiddos that are learning one language, is that they have a limited vocabulary. And they're really utilizing the linguistic resources that they have. They're pulling from this language and pulling from this language to really let you know what they're trying to say. So that's really typical to see for kids that are learning multiple languages. And again, wouldn't really be an area that, if you're seeing this, that alone wouldn't be a reason to kind of make a referral. Learning 2 languages will hurt my child's ability in school. There are several there's been several correlations to some cognitive advantages associated bilingualism, such as social reasoning, problem solving, and even some studies have shown creativity. If my child is showing communication delays, we should only speak to them in English. No, no. The best language model is a good language model. The language doesn't matter. So I often have families, who speak a different language at home, and they're like, my kid's gonna have to know English for school, and they start only speaking in English. However, their English is limited. So it's really important that whatever the educator or the person interacting with this child, whatever language they feel most comfortable in, they should be speaking in that language. Kids are little sponges and they really pick up on things. And we just want to make sure that we're giving them a model that's got robust vocabulary, giving them a language model that's got like correct grammar and pronunciation. So really, if there's one thing you take away, it's that all language is good. All language models are good for little ones. And our kiddos that are language, maybe they are learning 2 languages and they're delayed and they do end up needing services. Those kids can still be bilingual. I often sit down and I think, if this child is going to need to know Spanish to access their culture and their family language, they need to know Spanish, and then they're going to go to their education and need to know English. Those are really valuable languages. And so even those kiddos that are showing delays early on can still develop multiple languages. Oh, and another thing that often will come up, especially with our early little ones, is really when we're thinking about, okay, what is the amount of words they're saying, or the amount of signs that they're using? We want to be thinking about all the languages that child is exposed to. So sometimes I'll have families come in and they're like, they only have 5 words in English, but we've got 10 words in Mandarin. And really focusing, okay, that's 15 words in their expressive vocabulary altogether. So really taking into consider all the words that they have in their language. Okay, so you might be thinking, okay, how do I then identify if a kid is just having, differences in their language development because they are bilingual, or when a kid is having, some true delays in their language development. So the nice thing is that regardless of language or languages learned, children generally follow a similar developmental milestone when it comes to these really early communication skills. So knowing this can be helpful in determining if it's a language difference or if there is a true delay. And again, always refer to parents and always ask the parents and caregivers if they've met these milestones in their primary language, because that is really key. And what we're kind of thinking about is, have they met kind of these milestones in their language that they're more comfortable with and they're exposed to the most. And I forgot to put it up before break, but my little saying is, when in doubt, check it out. So, sometimes it can be challenging to determine, is it a difference or is it a delay? So I always recommend referring to a speech language pathologist because they really have the expertise in how to kind of parse out, is it difference, is it delay, and understanding that piece. So always kind of keeping that caveat of when in doubt, check it out. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time this morning because it's the weekend. And so I do have a short little 6-minute video. I think I'm gonna keep that. Actually, let's go ahead and watch it. It's about 6 minutes, and then we'll have about 5 minutes to discuss. I think that'll bring us through to the end. So you do have the link to this on the Google Doc. So if for any reason you're unable to hear when we share, you can always just kind of open it up. Or Becky, do you prefer if people just open it now on their own?
Yeah, I checked out the speed of the video, Cecile, and I think it would be best if folks could watch it on their own device, just so we don't have a delay or a lag in the audio. So if folks don't mind just turning off your camera and make sure you're on mute, and go ahead and click on that link. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'll pull it up again for you. As Cecile said, it's about 6 minutes. And yeah, just go ahead and watch on your own device with your video. Thank you, Cecile. With your video and your audio off, and then just come right back into the room when you're done, and we'll know you're back when you turn your camera back on. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I want to say that I really enjoyed today's session and how well organized you were, and I really appreciate the emphasis on the bilingual learners and the multilingual learners, and considerations for when we are in doubt and think we should check it out. I really love that, and it definitely makes me feel much more empowered going into next week, because I am in a space where I'm going to be talking with the family about speech. So the timing of this was like really, really perfect for me.
Good. Great. Well, if you want to, I love it, a follow-up email of how that convo goes. Any takeaways you have. Yeah. Thank you all. I really appreciate. I didn't want to say this at the beginning because I didn't want to make my staff nervous, but this is my first time doing a presentation like this. So thank you all for being my guinea pigs and going through this journey with me. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, Becky, are you going to be sending out a survey or anything?
Yes, yeah. So after this presentation, we'll send out the recording. Cecile's going to provide her slide deck, so you'll have access to that, as well as all the links that she shared in the workshop today. Cecile, I don't have an official survey, but what I usually do is I ask folks for any feedback or suggestions about how to continue to improve the presentation or what really landed well. And we really do take that feedback seriously, and I will make sure that Cecile gets that feedback if you have any to share.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Cecile. Thank you all so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. All the best to all of you. Happy, healthy start to your school year. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you hopefully at our next Institute event, which is coming up on September 24th. And it is, hold on here, I'll get you the link real quick if you have a moment to stay on. Beautiful, Brilliant Black Girls with Dr. Raydell Canny. And I'll put the link to that event here in the chat. Okay, thanks everybody. Feel free to log off when you're ready, and happy weekend to you all. Take care.
Thank you. Becky, did you want me to stay on?